Okay, I think we'll get started. Anyone logging in after now will just miss my intro. So welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar on M&A in the media sector, the impact of AI. And this is the latest in our series of selling your business. So it's great to see so many of you joining us this morning, hopefully reflecting the high level of interest in today's topic. And for many of you who are regulars, hopefully you're continuing to find our content useful. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, Moore Kingston Smith is a top 10 firm of accountants, tax and corporate finance advisors. We work with clients across a vast range of commercial industries, as well as not-for-profit clients and private individuals. In our West End office, we've got a team of about 9 partners and just over 100 people specialising in working exclusively with the media, entertainment and marketing services sectors. We also have a media specialist corporate finance arm, and they specialise in working on M&A, in particular sell-side advisory, taking sellers through the entire sales process. They look at strategic growth services, helping businesses sort of get into shape in advance of a capital event, and also financial due diligence, so acting for a number of trade acquirers and private equity houses in the space. And over the last 5 years, the team have completed over 50 transactions, including the sale of Total Media to Service Plan Group's Media Plus, which was announced only last week. We're also part of More Global, which is an international network with presence in over 100 countries. And we regularly team up with our colleagues around the world to assist on cross-border matters and to support clients with their international growth aspirations. So today we will be looking at the impact that AI is having on the sector, both in terms of the impact so far and as well as the future impact and its effect or potential effect on M&A activity. So I'm delighted to be joined by Jonathan Peachey, COO of Next 15, and James Poulter, Head of AI and Innovation at House 337, which is also part of Next 15. And they'll be joined by my colleague Paul Winterflood for what I'm sure will be an incredibly insightful 45 minutes, as they'll give their own perspectives on what they're seeing in the market at the minute. So a couple of housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded, so please do share with any of your colleagues or peers or anyone who couldn't make it today. Obviously, this webinar is for you and we want you to get as much out of it as possible. So please do ask questions. Please pop them in the Q&A function. Much easier for me to keep track of them there. And then I'll weave them into the panel discussion as appropriate. And lastly, there's a little feedback survey for you at the end. Please do fill it out. It's really useful for us to help shape future webinars. So to kick things off, I'd like to welcome Paul Winterflood, who's Head of M&A Media at Moore Kingston Smith. And before we get into our AI discussion, Paul's just going to give us a quick 5-minute update on the latest deal activity within the media and marketing services sector. So over to you, Paul.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. So as Esther said, I'm going to start off with a review of the M&A market, looking at some of the trends and notable transactions, as well as an outlook for the period ahead. We publish a quarterly report which looks at activity in the space. Our most recent one was published 2 or 3 weeks ago. So if you'd like to read that, then it's available on our website. The basis of our analysis is that we look at all transactions in the media and marketing services sectors involving either a UK buyer or a UK seller, and so that's what we use as the basis of the numbers that you're going to see now. So just starting off with deal volumes, and so coming out of 2023, which, as you can see, was a tougher M&A environment, very much reflecting the tougher trading conditions that everybody endured last year. There was optimism in the sector that 2024 would be better, with expectations of improving client spend and good news on the horizon expected around inflation and interest rates. And in terms of 2023, we saw that it was more of a sell-side problem. There were plenty of well-funded acquirers in the space, but sellers weren't wanting to or weren't able to sell because trading often wasn't good enough or was slightly volatile to be able to support their valuation aspirations. Additionally, what we saw in last year, and I think it's extended into 2024, is that in more volatile trading environment, deals take longer to take place. They get stretched. Buyers want to take longer time to do due diligence, meaning there's more chances that things can happen, which around a deal, which means that things need renegotiating, meaning that as a result, deals take longer, and furthermore, deal volumes fall because things are just taking much longer to take place. Moving into 2024, I think the client outlook surveys that we've run, I think the start of the year has been a bit of a mixed bag for people. I think at the end of 2023, there was hope and expectation that things would improve very rapidly, but I think certainly people have found that the first half of the year maybe harder than they were expecting relative to their expectations in 2023. And in particular, I think the TV sector trading has been very, very tough in particular. However, from a deal perspective, as you can see, it's been an excellent start to the year. After the quarter-on-quarter reductions we saw last year through the year, it's pleasing to see such a strong rebound in activity levels. And I think whilst it possibly surpasses our expectations of where intuitively the market feels like, that's still an excellent start to the year. And certainly our perspective is that we expect to see the market strengthening through the year as client spend situation improves and interest rates start to fall, and there's just a generally better environment for deal doing. The other element on the chart is the level of private equity backed activity, and that's something we track in all sectors, and that's is either a direct private equity investment, or where a private equity backed business, say Brain Labs for instance, make a bolt-on acquisition. And as you can see, private equity has made up the majority of transactions post-COVID. Whilst there's been a drop-off in 2024 to 45%, the lowest post-COVID, it's still a significant factor at play. And I definitely would not expect that line to continue on the downward trend over the next few years. I would say quite the opposite, in fact. For smaller capability bolt-ons, private equity-backed group interest remains high. Additionally, I think we're seeing a lot of the groups that received private equity investment around 2020 starting to come to the end of their investment cycle, bedding in the acquisitions they've made. Once they've get new private equity involvements, owners, as Brain Labs did last year, I think we expect to see a fresh wave of M&A activity occurring, and that's before we even start talking about AI. And finally, just touching on a few of the notable transactions over the last few months, and just focusing on the networks for a moment. Whilst there's been a reduction in the proportion of PE deals, there's been significant activity from the networks. Havas have probably been the most acquisitive of the networks over the last few years, and they've continued that with the acquisitions of very much agency businesses, so Ledger Bennett and Wilderness. Omnicom and Publicis have made a couple of significant acquisitions, which I think are quite interesting because they are probably a bit further away from the traditional agency world. Flywheel was Omnicom's biggest acquisition to date, showing that significant transactions are definitely taking place. And they've also followed that up with the acquisition of a post-production and VFX house, Coffee and TV, very much demonstrating how acquirers across the sector are investing in a spectrum of capabilities as the world evolves. And on that note, Publicis, Spinnaker, the acquisition of Spinnaker, who are actually a supply chain services specialist, again shows how the agencies are probably evolving more into consulting style groups, covering a vast array of different capabilities, all complementing each other. There's been a lot made of management consultants coming into the Marcoms space, but I think this shows how the networks in particular are doing the reverse as well. So in summary, 2024 has started off very, very positively. We expect the momentum to keep building through the year. And we're very much optimistic for 2024 and beyond, particularly as agencies and other media businesses trading starts to improve. And we definitely do not see any let up in acquirer demand, particularly for cutting edge capabilities, particularly if they're underpinned by innovative use of AI in particular. So on that note, I'll hand over to Esther to kick off the panel discussion.
Thank you, Paul. And as Paul said, if you want to read about our M&A report in more detail, it's available on our website, and it covers sort of quite a lot of detail around the different subsectors. So I'm delighted now that Paul's going to be joined by James and Jonathan. So James Poulter is head of AI and innovation at House 337, which is part of Next 15. James sold his agency Vixen Labs to House 337 last year, and we were delighted to advise James and his co-founder Jen on that transaction. And James is a recognised authority in conversational AI technologies, and I'm looking forward to finding out exactly what that means. And he has extensive...
Me too.
Yeah, Peachey. And he has extensive experience in the ethical use of AI, corporate deployment of advanced AI systems such as ChatGPT and GPT-4, and the integration of conversational AI into marketing and business strategies. His knowledge and expertise have been critical in driving successful digital transformation for numerous clients and organisations. Delighted also to welcome Jonathan Peachey. Jonathan is Chief Operating Officer of Next 15, the growth consultancy, and Jonathan has 35 years of experience in digital transformation and previously had roles at the BBC, and also sold his business to the Engine Group, which ultimately sold to Next 15. And Jonathan is heavily involved in the UK tech startup scene, having founded a number of companies himself and invested in or mentored numerous others. So welcome, James and Jonathan, and Paul is staying with us also. So we have about half an hour for our panel discussion. So we're going to kick off with you, James. So, I mean, obviously AI is not a new phenomenon, and you've been an expert in it much longer than everyone's been talking about it. And clearly there's been significant developments over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. So from a sort of a technological perspective, initially, what has changed? What are the key changes we've seen?
Yeah, well, thanks, and welcome everybody in this morning. It's AI, I suppose, has become the topic that seems to dominate every conversation that we walk into at the moment across all aspects of business, whether that's actually in work that we're doing with clients on their marketing and communications exercises, in building customer experiences, but also actually internally within the agency and within the network. And as Jonathan will attest, it's something that we're thinking about deeply across Next 15 within all of the agencies when it comes to operations and the way in which we run our work. What's changed significantly isn't necessarily just the technology, although there has been significant leaps and bounds in that in the past 18 months. And I think anyone that's been following this space with any level of depth, and that level of depth probably is just watching the news, will know that this has come on in a significant way since the leaping onto the scene of ChatGPT in November of 2022. The following updates that have now come from all of the big tech players continue to make this a challenging space just to stay on top of the latest updates. I think about this every day, all day, and even I struggle to stay on top of everything that's out from all of these different platforms. But the biggest change is that when we see these big significant technology leaps happen, and that they come to all of the platforms that we use every day, people's expectation level of what can be done with these technologies also rises. And I think that's been the biggest shift, is that for a long time, AI was seen as something that was really for the CIO organization to worry about, for the digital team maybe to think about, but not for the CMO organization to think about. And that has radically shifted in the past 18 months, that AI now is on the top of every CMO's agenda. If you read any of the reports about what CMOs and kind of chief marketing teams are thinking about, they're thinking about how AI is going to change not just what they do, but how they do it. And that's, I think, the biggest shift for us. And so we're trying to respond to that, not only in thinking about what does it look like to build brand experiences that are fueled by and accelerated by artificial intelligence, but also what does it mean to bring those things about in the way in which we work, whether that's in the production process within studio teams, whether that's in the thinking about translation and transcreation of content across many different markets, and how can we use AI to fuel our next generation of research and insights that ultimately makes better creative work. Across the whole spectrum, we're thinking about that process.
How has it changed the way that clients are viewing things and what they're looking for from AI, and the way that it's actually impacting the work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, you would think that with all of the chatter, that everyone would be leaping to deploy this stuff. And there is, some that are taking those steps. But I would say what we see more often with engagements at the moment is clients are coming through an education process. They are really beginning to learn and understand, what does this stuff really mean? And I think that's actually a positive thing, because we've seen in previous technology revolutions, you've only got to look at the NFTs and the metaverses of the past couple of years, that people, the first thing that happens is there's a loss of news. The second thing happens is that loads of people slap metaverse into their title on LinkedIn and then try and become overnight experts. And then people rush to run experiments, claim success, and then actually declare failure very quickly afterwards. What seems to be happening with AI is that people are taking a more considered approach. And that's, I think, a positive for us in the long term, because this technology doesn't sit with like one team or one person's job. You'll often hear me say that AI is everyone's job now, and it will affect all of our roles in some way, shape, or form. And for that reason, people are taking more considered approaches. So we're particularly seeing a lot of interest in developing things like ethical frameworks and policies for how people will deploy AI as a first step, rather than necessarily experimentation. And then moving into the innovation cycle, particularly when it comes to things like customer services, building new customer experiences, in particular led by sectors like the retail sector, financial services sectors, and a few others. And they are looking for ways that we can take processes that historically have taken many clicks or many scrolls or many searches and condense those down to a single utterance, a single sentence being said to an AI that retrieves the same result. And ultimately that changes the experience for customers.
Got a question here. I've been asked, could I ask you what podcasts or information channels you follow to keep on top of the new tech, or on how to use it in Marcoms? What should all the agencies out there be listening to or watching?
Well, there's a very insightful chap on YouTube called James Poulter. He has a great YouTube channel that I would highly recommend. Aside from the blatant self-promotion, I think there's a couple of places that we really see some insights coming from. A lot of these come from the US, where a lot of the tech is being developed firsthand. I would particularly recommend following along with Ethan Mollick on LinkedIn and his content stream. He's just written a fantastic book, which I don't have to hand, but I'll find in the break maybe. So I definitely recommend kind of going there. There's a lot of work being done out of Harvard at the moment on the ethical stance, particularly a chap called Reed Blackman, who I'd recommend his work on looking at that as well. And we do a lot of work with a site called voicebot.ai, who do a lot of research and kind of stay up on the space. So definitely recommend those as a good starting place.
Plenty of bedtime reading there then. And Jonathan, I mean, what about sort of looking at it from a broader agency perspective? What are you seeing from a client perspective and also sort of operationally?
I think I would echo what James has said. We see less client action around this than we would expect. So I think our clients are investigating it, but we had, James knows I'm talking about, we had one client that got very excited about something that we've been talking to them about, that they have an AI board which is now looking at how they deploy these things, because I think the extraordinary potency of AI is frightening organizations as much as it's exciting them. So they're being much more careful, I think, about how they think about and deploy AI than perhaps people were around blockchain and Web3 activities. So we're seeing lots of interest, lots of experimentation. We are not yet seeing, but I'm sure we will, impact on pricing, and pricing is going to be an important component of all of this. I mean, and when I look at what we are doing internally, certainly I'm sure in common with pretty much every other group of agencies, there's a lot of experimentation going on with the tools. So everyone's trying to, as James was saying, everyone's trying to make sure that where we can use the tools to enhance what our people are doing, we do that. Nobody, I think, is replacing humans. Everyone is using AI to make humans be more effective, get to answers quicker, get to ideas quicker, make the output of the work better. And we are looking at how we drive efficiency and effectiveness in the work that we're doing today. But we're also quite focused on where the innovation is going to come from, because efficiency and effectiveness is table stakes for all agencies. I mean, if you don't do that, you will not have an agency. So it's interesting and useful, but it's not where the future lies. So a lot of our time is being spent on thinking about what the future for agencies like ours looks like.
I mean, looking to the future, I mean, what is the likely direction of travel over the next few years, and also sort of how quickly is that the change in pace likely to be in terms of sort of clients and the general sort of evolution of agencies and consultancies using AI?
I mean, I think if I absolutely knew the answer to that, I would be
very rich man,
I'd
retired.
somewhere. I mean, broadly, I think, you know, there is a pricing challenge here, which is, you know, pricing by inputs, which typically has a lot of organizations have used that, and clients like that will go away. And I think pricing by outputs and outcomes will be the norm in the future. I see a lot of agencies will think about changing from project-based work to maybe subscription-based products. So is there a version of an agency which exists on a client's desktop that uses AI to give a lot of the same benefits, and agency staff are involved? And I think, you know, the models are free, the data that powers them isn't. So I think data becomes more and more important, and you can see that. I mean, you referenced the Total Media deal just now. You know, the sort of data that those sorts of organizations have access to becomes even more important, I think, in the future that we're moving into.
James, what about in terms of sort of clients and their demands and their expectations, I suppose, of what's possible and how quick things are possible?
Yeah, so I think speed is a really interesting point here in terms of how fast do we see clients coming out of what would generally say kind of experimentation mode into operation mode. What we have seen in recent months is we're getting the first examples of large-scale deployments of this conversational tech, in particular in the form of chatbots, in the form of search, particularly on-page search, in terms of, yeah, kind of websites deploying this stuff, so you get generative answers coming back rather than necessarily just a list of links. But these are the early first fruits, and I think it's quite telling because we've just gone through a cycle of OpenAI, Microsoft, Google all having their big events showcasing kind of their latest technology. Typically at these types of shows like Google I/O or you know, kind of OpenAI had their spring update event a couple of weeks ago, you would usually have a slew of case studies from big name brands proving the point that they've got all of this stuff up and running, and that just wasn't present. I mean, the examples were often from brands that were relatively unknown, or they were showing demos of things that weren't in production. And that's, I think, quite a telling kind of moment here, is that we are not yet at the point where we do have these kind of large scale deployments, for the reasons that Jonathan cited, that boards, AI ethics policies, legal. I mean, I'm having more conversations with, you know, kind of chief legal officers and, you know, kind of heads of those types of departments at the moment than I've ever had with any other kind of Marcom's, yeah, kind of work in the history of my career. So I think that's pretty telling in terms of how fast it will take for us to get to these things, in particular because clients are very sensitive to which of the big partners they're going to work with. You know, the AI wars are somewhat a proxy for the kind of cloud wars. So if you are a predominantly Amazon house or predominantly Google house, you've got some decisions there to make about whether or not you want all of your eggs in one basket, which can bring a ton of efficiency, but also risk if they are not the ones with the leading AI tooling that is going to be out there in the future. So I think there's a lot that is still unsettled, and we haven't really even gone through the kind of great acquisition which is going to happen over the next, I think, 24 months, of a lot of the smaller players often building the kind of point solutions that many people within agencies or within specific teams would use, where those are going to get gobbled up by the much larger tech companies. I think we will see that happening, which may then cause some further disruption in what clients and brands actually deploy, because many of the tools that they buy today may end up being a part of a larger ecosystem player that they're not working with tomorrow, and so that may also slow things down.
To what extent might sort of, you know, if clients perceive that implementation is being done by AI, to what extent are clients going to start thinking, well, I can just do this myself then, I don't need an agency to do it because I can just ask ChatGPT to do it for me?
Well, and I think that's the big thing that has happened in the past 12 months is the undoing of that perception. I think when clients first saw GPT 3.5 come out last year, you had these kind of proof of concept demos being done by internal development teams, and we had some clients coming to us and saying, well, I've got an internal developer who knows how to get into the API, so I'm kind of done. And very quickly they've realized that that's just not the case or the possibility. To show that I've been saying in a recent update with another client last week that the proof of concept is both our kind of tip of the spear and our Achilles heel at the same time. It's an amazing thing for showing the art of the possible, but also it can be a very difficult thing to show what these things look like when they're scaled. And the reality is of scaling an AI solution is something that needs all of the rigor that has gone into every other digital technology up until now. You don't have large enterprise brands and clients running their corporate websites on Squarespace. You could build a website on Squarespace, absolutely you can, but these are consumer tools often, for more low fidelity solutions. And the same is true with AI. Yes, you can build a very simple chatbot using one of these free to use, easy to pick up solutions. But when you talk about scale, strategy, user experience, testing, quality assurance, all of this stuff comes in. And that's, I think, the role of the agency in the future is probably less about making the core technologies that will put these things together, but more knowing how to utilize them, scale them, and improve that experience. That's the thing that people are going to be looking for more of.
Just to add to that, I mean, in-housing has been a trend for years before.
Yeah.
I think AI probably gives added impetus to a push to in-house, and usually things that are in-house tend to be the sort of lower down the food chain, more executional things, which you can do well, and I'm sure AI will augment those teams and make them more powerful. But the reason that agencies are still around is because they bring a perspective, because they work with many other clients, they can see what's going on in the market, whereas internal teams are by definition focused on the client that they are part of. So I think, as James says, it probably changes the value proposition for the agency, that external perspective, that bigger thinking. And I suppose the other thing is that you can imagine that one of the things that will happen with AI is a push to a more hyper-personalized future, and that's not easy to do. It requires data skills, technology skills, and a whole host of orchestration across the sort of the media and creative and data supply chain. And I think internal teams are going to struggle to do that. Certainly, if you're a major consumer organization at the level that you need to happen. So I don't think that it's going to fundamentally change the shift between agencies and people in housing.
I mean, the AND partnership and M6 recently merged, and one of those reasons cited was that the impact of AI will mean that sort of creative and media need to sort of work more closely together as a holistic offering. And I suppose that is part of that, is the strategic wraparound that you perhaps can't replicate via AI. Is that sort of a trend that you're seeing as well?
I think that's right. You again, sort of thinking about hyper-personalization, you need to have your creative and your data and your media all working together. And I think, I mean, we're seeing a trend of consolidation across the industry, and I don't think this is a coincidence. I think everyone can see that those things need to work more closely. In the past, it's been very possible to have your sort of big above the line agency doing, thinking big thoughts and having that big idea, and another agency downstream picking up the execution of that, and all giving stuff to a media agency. I think the future is a much more holistic, joined up version, and I think you will see deals and mergers of all sorts that sort of feed into that idea.
So Paul, just thinking about the numbers then, we like to think about the numbers from a financial perspective. What do you expect the impact of AI to have?
I think we're expecting it to have a significant and increasing impact over the coming years. I think that the timing is the question, as both James and Jonathan referred to. At our annual survey event in November, two of the key metrics being revenue growth and operating profit margin showed a polarization beginning to happen of performance. and agencies evolving into being in the bottom quartile, showing a real fall in revenue growth, operating profit margins of sub 5%, versus the top quartile of agencies demonstrating revenue growth in excess of 20% and operating profit margins again in excess of 20%. And that was off 2022 financial information. And a lot has happened since then, both macroeconomically, politically, and that's before the impact of AI is layered on top of that. And so that polarization, I think, over the next probably decade is going to drive further. I think agencies absolutely need to have a strategy to be in the thriving category, those that offer strategic solutions, consulting capabilities, and are using AI solutions, recommending them to clients. The bigger picture thinking that both Jonathan and James referred to are going to be those leading the performance charts, and those that aren't, and those that offer a more commoditized offer are going to be the ones that are going to struggle, unfortunately. I think the big question is around, it's around the speed of it. And I think that in the Outlook surveys that we've run, I think the majority of agencies were thinking about it, but initially it was they've been using it to drive operational efficiencies, and the impact on financials hadn't yet come through. Additionally, there's then going to be quite profound financial impacts due to if there's changes in pricing models, if there's M&A activity, all of that is all going to have a significant financial impact on the sector.
Yeah, I think pricing models is going to be a really important one. And Jonathan, you sort of alluded to that earlier, and I was going to come back to it. And interestingly, it's one of the questions we've had from the audience, actually. So they've asked, so you've mentioned pricing models. How do you see the approach to pricing strategies develop as AI does become more embedded in agency work and reduces the human time element? So purely applying a markup to time cost becoming redundant. I mean, do you have live examples of where you're using that, Jonathan, or how do you see that evolving?
So we've done quite a lot of work in some of we're quite a broadly based group, so we've looked at some of the things that we do, and we've done quite a lot of work exploring how clients value what we do for them. And there's a clear sort of hierarchy of things that we do, which are the client wants but attributes little value to, and all the way up to extremely high value things. So, and you can imagine that media monitoring in a comms agency is something that is essential, but not valued very highly. And that is the sort of thing that we are moving very quickly to automate. I mean, in the past that was done by humans. In the future, no humans will be harmed in that process. Versus the sort of strategic counsel, crisis support, those sorts of things, which are, whatever you charge, frankly, is a fraction of the value of that thing. So I think, the way that we see this evolving is that the more commoditized work that James referred to, we will automate and charge for on probably a subscription basis or some sort of outcome basis. And the higher value strategic counsel activity that we get involved in will we may charge for in a different way. It's going to take time, and it's not just what we want, it's what procurement departments at clients are willing to accept as well, because time and materials is very easy for them to deal with, because they can just push down on rates. But if rates are not part of it, then it's more difficult for them. So this is going to be a sort of a pan-industry learning journey, I suppose.
We've had a question come in about how you avoid bias when you're using AI/LL. I'm not quite sure what LL stands for, but you might know.
I think it might have missed large language models, I think is off the end of there. Yeah.
Oh, large language models, of course. Yes, I knew that. Not.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the first is probably to start by dispelling the myth that AI is already biased, which I think is the thing that most people kind of start with. And there's a truth to that and a myth to it, that AI is biased because the thing that it's been trained upon is the internet, and the internet is biased in most cases. Biased in terms of the content that's been generated predominantly by sadly representative here, sorry chaps, but kind of white middle class men, mostly in the kind of the major capitals of the world, have populated the internet for the past kind of 4 decades. However, many of these tools, and in fact, most of the tools that we're talking about today, the likes of ChatGPT, Gemini from Google, Claude from Anthropic, and many others, have had an awful lot of work done to them in the past couple of years to eliminate the majority of those biases, and is an ongoing process of eliminating biases. The real challenge for us as users of these tools, assuming that you don't, Ian, work with one of the large tech companies where you have influence over the bias of a foundation model, is really the challenge for us is in the application of these tools. And the bias is both one of the data and also the use cases. When we start thinking about bringing our own data and bringing that to the table of using one of these tools, you might begin to hear the phrase over the next year, RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. This is a kind of a process where we bring our own data, and rather than an AI being pointed at the web or its own knowledge base, we point it at a specific set of data that you as a client have brought to the tool. That is a real challenge, not really for the AI to not be biased, but for you to not be biased when you put that data in the first place. And so whether that's customer data, whether that's personnel data, whether it's information about hiring, for example, say you're building a bot that is trying to help predict the right candidate for a job role, and you've only ever used pre-existing candidate information of people that were hired by the company. Well, if you've got inherent biases in your hiring practices, then those inherent biases are going to be brought to the AI. It's got nothing to do with the AI being biased, and everything to do with what you've brought to the table. So the data is one thing, and then the use cases is a bias question as well, in terms of when you have an AI being used in any of these systems in the future, how do you make sure that we are keeping humans, what we call, in the loop? How do you make sure that when AI is being given the opportunity, I often say, when you give AI the opportunity to make decisions for you, you also give it the opportunity to make mistakes for you. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be in charge of those mistakes, or are you just going to let the AI do its job in the background? And so avoiding bias in that situation is also about making sure that when we give AI opportunity to partake in some kind of decision-making process or some kind of content creation in the business, that there is a significant level and an appropriate level of human intervention watching what's going on to make sure that anything that comes out the other end doesn't cause unintended consequences, let's say.
Somebody's asked, oh, sorry, Jonathan, go.
Well, I was just going to, I completely agree with all of that. I think the other thing is that often there is a tendency to compare AI with the very best of humans, the outliers of humans, but most humans are biased as well in all sorts of ways. So we shouldn't be assuming that humans are perfect and the AI is not. The AI is clearly biased, and as James says, it is the worst it will ever be, and it's just going to get better because there's the financial upside for the organizations that generate these models in debiasing them is so astonishingly huge that it has all of their attention. And our own data is the thing that will fuel the best use cases. And as James says, that's also, we need to think about bias in that. And indeed, all of the proposed legislation that's coming forward, it sort of requires organizations to think about that as they deploy AI in the way that's, if you think about where we are with GDPR, that privacy by design is a core concept that's baked into that. I think non-bias by design will be a core development principle for these AI tools going forward.
Yeah, thank you. So James, just sort of coming back a bit more to sort of, I guess, you personally, obviously you sold your agency Vixen Labs to House 337. What was the sort of the driving force behind that, and how does that sort of set you up for sort of the exciting world of AI ahead?
Oh, just cash and being able to kind of go live on the beach, Esther. I mean, that's obviously
sounds good. Honesty.
No, far from it. I think not that that there's not always a financial and kind of organizational incentive for anyone that's on that journey. I think if there isn't, then people wouldn't do it. But the reality for us was that we saw this moment kind of coming for where AI has now got to probably about 18 months ago. And particularly after ChatGPT began to get the attention it was getting and seemed to not be just a fad evolution, but something that was going to become a permanent installation in our clients' lives. That was the thing that really kind of kick-started that process for us. For historical context, we have been an AI-focused agency, but particularly focused on things like voice technology platforms like Alexa and Google Assistant, for which we do a lot of work with Amazon on the building of that platform. And also on the kind of previous generation of chatbots, the kind of pre-AI version of these chatbots that existed. But when this new technology kind of came on the scene, we felt that this was going to mean that in the future, AI was going to touch many, many more points of the business than we had a direct inroad with, and that it would begin to transform brand experience from end to end, whether that's above the line, below the line comms, whether that's in the production process of both advertising and PR and social media content, and also the search landscape is also being drastically affected. And so for us, we felt like being on a broader platform and being part of a network that Next 15 is part of would give us more opportunity in the future to reach bigger client bases. Also for us, it was a diversification point. About 70% of our business comes from North America. The House 337 brand previously, as mentioned, which has roots in engine creative prior to the acquisition by Next 15, has a very rooted domestic presence here in the UK and in Europe. And so for us, we also felt like the opportunity to reach the kind of FTSE 500s here in Europe with a kind of very specialized offering was going to become significant as AI was becoming less of just a America first kind of model and something that was going to impact us globally. So that kickstarted the process and certainly has borne itself out actually in the conversations that Jonathan and I now get to have with many of our clients across the group and specifically within House 337 has shown that AI has become an issue, not just for kind of those big US kind of multinationals, but particularly domestic clients here in the UK and across all parts of their business. And that's why it made sense for us to kind of start making that move.
Sounds like it's worked out very well.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
And Paul, in terms of sort of the broader M&A market, what do you expect the changes that AI will have on the M&A market?
As with everything this morning, clearly it's going to have a significant effect over the coming years. In the short term, clearly there's deals already being done due to AI. There's the great acquisition that James talks about, and particularly of specific technology solutions. In terms of the impact for media businesses, marketing services businesses over the coming years, there's probably a short-term impact in terms of if you're thinking of selling your business over the coming years. Whereas 18 months ago, the topic wasn't on everyone's mind, it is now. Therefore, if you're speaking to acquirers or even thinking about selling your business over the coming years, you need to have a view on it. You need to have a strategy explaining how that you use it as a business and how you work with it and how you're not going to be replaced by it. Now, I don't think there's the expectation that all businesses should go out and invest in a large language model. I think quite the opposite. But there's absolutely is the expectation from all acquirers, whether it's trade buyers or private equity houses, that businesses need to have a view and a strategy behind it. If you then look at in terms of what the networks are doing, the likes of Publicis, WPP, they're investing hundreds of millions of pounds over the next few years in AI generally. You've got challenger groups, so Brandtech, Stagwell, Next 15, they're all investing money. Some of that will be on internal investments. They're all acquisitive groups as well. So of course that is going to lead to acquisition activity. And I think that the trend that we've seen over the last sort of probably 5, 6, 7 years at network level is it's been high quality acquisitions focusing on tech capabilities, complemented by agencies which are have leading capabilities. You've then got private equity, where there's market disruption. Private equity come in their droves. Over the last 6 years, private equity has been very heavily influenced in the marketing services space around the sort of digital transformation, e-commerce, general data revolution. AI is the next extension of that, and so there's going to be a significant wave of investment activity, M&A activity relevant to people throughout the sector, and it's going to be an interesting few years ahead, certainly.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And obviously, Jonathan, Next 15 being included there in sort of the category of inquirers, Next 15 being highly acquisitive. What impact do you think AI is going to have on your M&A strategy?
Well, as Paul says, we already want every company that we talk to have a view on AI and how it's going to affect them. Not every company is going to have the resources to make AI work for them, but often they, in combination with other types of businesses, there is something amazing. So often now we are talking to people about sort of bring them together with something else to do something new. We do see some people who say, "Oh, it's all fine. We're using DALL-E or Midjourney to do creative, and we steer clear of those organizations." And sometimes we look at businesses and see in them something different from what they see in themselves. So sometimes we see, sometimes we see sources of data that we can use for these large language models that those businesses themselves have amassed, but isn't the thing that they're selling, but we see that as value in them. So it's making quite a big difference. And we do AI, we use AI to do our DD, and we do DD on their AI perspectives as well. So as Paul says, I think it's going to have a significant impact on acquisitions for us and the rest of the sector over the coming years.
Thank you very much. Conscious I have gone 2 minutes over our build finish time, so apologies everyone, but we managed to have kept all the audience that we had, which is good. So everyone's still there and listening. So thank you very much, Paul, James and Jonathan. That was an insightful 45 minutes. I've certainly learned a lot more about AI than I knew at the beginning of this session, and hopefully everyone in the audience has as well. So don't forget, everybody, this session has been recorded, so please do share with peers and colleagues. It will be uploaded onto our website, so please do share it. And please do complete the little feedback survey. It's super useful in shaping future webinars in terms of topics that you want to hear about. So thank you all very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks all.